I preferred the symphony of the city, the rumble of traffic, the distant sirens, the murmur of a million conversations. These were my lullabies. Yet there was a silence that called to me, a silence found only in forgotten places. It whispered in the rustle of wind through abandoned buildings, in the creak of rusted swings in empty playgrounds. It was this silence that drew me to photography, to capturing the beauty of decay, the stories etched in crumbling walls. One day, while browsing an online forum for urban explorers, I stumbled upon a photograph. It depicted a creek, its surface shrouded in mist, ancient trees with gnarled branches forming a skeletal arch above it. The caption read simply, "Hollow Creek." I knew then that I had found my next subject.
The drive to Hollow Creek was a journey through forgotten landscapes. Bustling cities gave way to sleepy towns, their main streets lined with vacant stores, their paint peeling like sunburnt skin. As she ventured deeper, the towns grew smaller, the silence between them wider, until even the chirping of birds seemed unnaturally loud. A sign, barely clinging to its post, announced her arrival. "Welcome to Hollow Creek, population 23. The paint was faded, the number obviously outdated.
The late afternoon sun cast long shadows as I drove down the deserted main street. Buildings stood empty, windows like vacant eyes staring back at me. The only movement was the wind, swirling dust devils in the street, whispering secrets through broken window panes. A sense of unease settled upon me, a prickling at the back of my neck. It wasn't fear, not yet, but an awareness, a feeling of being observed. Her fingers trembled slightly as she reached for her camera bag, a thrill of apprehension mixing with her usual excitement.
The path to the creek was overgrown, reclaimed by nature. Thorns snagged at her clothes, and beneath her feet, fallen leaves crunched like breaking bones. The sunlight, filtered through the dense canopy, cast the woods in an ethereal greenish glow. The air hung heavy with the smell of damp earth and decay, a cloying perfume that seemed to cling to the back of her throat.
As I emerged from the trees, the creek came into full view. It was as captivatingly eerie as the photograph had promised. The water, a murky green, flowed sluggishly, as if burdened by unseen weights. Mist rose from its surface, coiling through the air like spectral fingers. The trees lining the banks leaned inward, their branches intertwining to form a natural archway, shrouding the creek in perpetual twilight. It was a place of haunting beauty, a scene seemingly untouched by time, yet deeply marked by it.
Determined to capture the ethereal beauty of the creek, Claire continued shooting. She experimented with different angles, different compositions, trying to capture the haunting stillness that permeated the air. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, she noticed something odd in one of her shots. A shadow, darker than the surrounding darkness, lurking at the edge of the frame. It seemed to be partially submerged in the water, its form indistinct, yet undeniably present.
At first, I dismissed it as a trick of the light, a play of shadows from the trees. But as I took more pictures, the shadow reappeared, always at the edge of the frame, always just out of focus. It seemed to shift and writhe, like something alive, something watching me from beneath the murky surface.
A cold dread began to seep into her, chilling her to the bone.
My finger hovered over the shutter button. I would take one more picture, one final shot, and then I would leave.
This time there was no mistaking it.
Rising from the water, its form solidifying from the mist and shadows, was a figure.
It was tall and gaunt, its skin deathly pale, almost translucent. Long skeletal fingers dripped with the murky water of the creek, and its face, if it could be called a face, was a grotesque mockery of human features. Empty sockets stared back at her, and a gaping maw, filled with rows of needle-like teeth, seemed to stretch into a silent scream.
The camera slipped from my numb fingers, clattering to the ground.
A scream caught in her throat, choked by the sheer terror that gripped her. She stumbled backward, her foot catching on a root, sending her sprawling onto the hard ground.
The figure in the creek turned towards her, its empty socket seeming to burn into her very soul. It began to move, gliding effortlessly over the water, its long limbs propelling it forward with an unnatural speed.
Adrenaline surged through Claire's veins, overriding the paralyzing fear. She plunged into the woods, her breath catching in her throat, branches whipping at her face. The forest floor seemed to tilt and sway beneath her feet, the familiar path now a treacherous maze.
Behind me, I could hear the splashing of water, the sound of the creature pursuing me through the trees. Its growls reverberated through the woods, each one closer than the last, urging me onward.
She pushed herself harder, ignoring the stinging scratches of thorns, the burning in her lungs. The trees, once beautiful in their decay, now seemed menacing, their gnarled branches like grasping claws reaching out to hinder her escape.
As I ran, I could sense the creature's presence behind me, feel its icy breath on the back of my neck. It was toying with me, I realized, herding me through the woods like a predator stalking its prey. The drive back was a blur. I sped through the night, the image of the creature burned into my mind, the echo of its growls still ringing in my ears. I didn't stop until I reached the familiar lights of the city, the comforting sounds of traffic washing over me like a cleansing wave. Even then, it took hours for my heart to stop racing, for the tremors in my hands to cease.
Back in her apartment, surrounded by the familiar and the living, Claire tried to convince herself it had been a hallucination, a trick of the fading light and her overactive imagination. But deep down, she knew the truth. Hollow Creek was not just another abandoned town.
One rainy afternoon, unable to resist the pull any longer, I finally gave in. I shut myself in my darkroom, the red safety light casting an eerie glow over the trays of chemicals. As I developed the film, a sense of dread washed over me, prickling at the back of my neck. Images began to appear on the photo paper, each one a snapshot of that haunting day. The creek, shrouded in mist, the trees twisted and gnarled, the shadows deepening as the sun began to set. And then, there it was, the creature, captured in all its grotesque glory. It stood at the edge of the creek, its pale form shimmering in the fading light, its empty sockets staring directly at the camera, as if it had known I was there.
The photo was more terrifying than she could have imagined.
That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake, the photo of the creature seared into my mind, the growls from the woods echoing in my ears. The city noises, once comforting, now seemed distant and insignificant, unable to drown out the fear that clawed at the edges of my mind. I had escaped Hollow Creek, but it seemed the creek had not finished with me. The experience changed me. The city, once a symphony of life, now seemed harsh and unforgiving. The crowds that once energized me now suffocated me, each face a potential mask for something monstrous. I stopped venturing out to capture the beauty of abandoned places, the silence now a source of dread, not peace.
Claire never went back to Hollow Creek. The town and the creature that resided there remained a scar on her memory, a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of the world. She kept the photo of the creature locked away in a drawer, a tangible reminder of the horrors that could lie hidden in forgotten corners of the world.
Sometimes, in the quiet of the night, when the city noises faded and shadows stretched long and thin, I would hear the creek's murmur in the distance, feel the icy breath of the creature on the back of my neck. And I would remember the terror, the bone-chilling certainty that I had looked into the abyss and the abyss had looked back.
The experience had changed her, branded her with the knowledge that some places were best left forgotten, that some secrets were not meant to be unearthed. and she knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that the haunting of Hollow Creek would stay with her, a chilling echo in the silence of her days, a shadowy spectre lurking at the edge of her vision forever.